come back and run when you're older. Aren't you too young? I hear it all the time. They said, oh, when I ran for chairman, they're like, he's too young. He's out of his depth. He doesn't know what's happening, what's going on. And I just said, guys,
I think the
listen,
average age of
doesn't have,
the
yeah,
revolution at the during the Revolutionary War, like the founding fathers, like the average age is like 34 years old. It's like 32 or
yeah,
34
or
years old.
even younger than that. A lot of them were 22,
Yeah.
24, 26.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the 435 podcast. I am your host, Robert McFarlane, and we have another great guest today, Carson Jorgensen. He is a candidate for the state of Utah governorship race against Spencer Cox. We dug right into his history, his experience at 34 years old. He's the youngest candidate in this race by a long shot. We talked about the Republican Party and that next generation coming up, what he sees for Utah and what he sees should be a priority for the conservative base here. We hope you enjoy this episode, get a lot about him. He was fun to talk to. I'm excited to see how he does in the convention race. Subscribe to this episode. Make sure you share it with a friend. If you're a delegate out there, please give me some feedback. Let me know what we could do better. And thanks to our partners, Blueform Media for our production team, FS Coffee Company in downtown St. George. If you're downtown St. George, make sure you stop by FS Coffee Company and grab a fresh roasted brew. All right, guys, enjoy this episode. We'll see you out there. Running sheep, is that something you've been, I saw in your video, your family's been in Utah for 170 years, and you've been farming and sheep herding the whole time, right? Is that right?
Yeah, no, that's it. Well, my family came here before Utah even became a state. My family was actually the ones that really brought the sheep industry to the state of Utah. And the sheep industry, what people don't realize, the sheep industry is actually what really built rural Utah. At one point, prior to World War II, there were 56 million sheep in the United States. Now there's around 5 million sheep. Utah had more in counties in Utah. There were more sheep in certain counties than there are in the entire United States right now.
Wow, that's pretty crazy. So what? I guess maybe this isn't interesting to anybody else, but like, what happened?
What was really interesting, and it's funny you asked this because this is something we've been really fighting for the last year, is the imports. So what happened is during World War II, we actually lost half the sheep population in the United States. A lot of folks went off to the war. They used a lot of the sheep to feed them during the war efforts. But we lost half the population, and with predatory imports and everything else that came along with that we've just never recovered from it.
Yeah, is it like a loss of the taste for sheep? Is it like people just don't want to eat it? Is it not processed as well? It's like maybe the cattle ranchers just did a better job marketing. I guess.
Yeah, what it boils down to. So there's a couple facets to that. So during the war effort, this is a thing. So people think, oh, it's not. No, this is a thing. So during the war effort, they actually fed lamb and mutton to a lot of the soldiers overseas. And the problem they had is it was getting stale and it was old and nasty before they even got to use it. And so they were feeding them this lamb and this mutton over there, and people were disgusted by it, but it wasn't because of the taste of it. It was because that they had waited so long to use it, and it was a subpar product at that point in time. And so that they came home, and a lot of people would never touch it again, and they actually passed that to their kids. And it was just one of those things. But you go to any high-end restaurant, and the most expensive thing on the menu is usually the lamb. It's not the ribeye, it's usually the lamb. And there's a reason for that, because lamb is great. But a lot of people got a bad taste in their mouth during the war and passed it on to the kids. But you're actually seeing a big resurgence in lamb in the United States right now.
Yeah, that's super. It actually makes me think about lobster, because like pre-World War II, lobster was like a garbage food. Like people would be like, you eat like the insects of the ocean, like that's disgusting. And then they started feeding like lobster to the soldiers, but it canned well, and the soldiers liked the taste of it. And potentially, to your point, maybe they didn't like the lamb and they liked the lobster, and then lobster became wildly popular after that. But before World War II, lobster was like, the poor people food.
Oh, sure. And yeah, we've just seen kind of a constant slide on it since then. And so, yeah, it's an interesting dynamic. 74% of what's consumed in the United States, as far as lamb and mutton goes, comes from a different country right now.
Oh,
And that
wow.
goes into a bigger issue about our food security, and what we've done in the food and agricultural industry to outsource food. As of 2019, the United States, for the first time in the history of our country, became a net importer of food. So we now import. If imports stop today, we don't actually produce enough to feed our people.
That's so crazy to me. It's how do we put ourselves in a position like that? Like how would that
It
it,
makes no sense to me. I
yeah.
mean, looking at it from the outside, this is an absolute national security risk, and but they're not addressing it. They continue. I mean, I reached out to our congressman here a month and a half ago. It's called GSP. So what it is it's money from the United States that they send to other countries to help develop their markets, to be able to ship things to the United States to help our economy. And it works fine in the manufacturing sector and other things where you're bringing parts from outside the United States. But the problem with that is when you do it, so they're actually doing it in lamb and beef. So they're actually sending United States money to other countries to help develop their beef and their lamb markets, to then turn around and send them to the United States. This makes no sense, and it was in the spending bill, and they're looking to re-implement GSP. So this is just kind of a guilty crack out there. Hey, if there's anybody out there watching, reach out to your congressman, here in Utah, especially if you're in Congressional District 1, reach out to Blake Moore's office and you tell him, hey, we want beef and lamb omitted from GSP.
Yeah, that's an interesting fact. I had no idea. So I'm glad you brought that up. Well, so
Yeah,
then it makes me think about the alfalfa, because something I heard that it's something like 30 or 40% of the alfalfa we grow here in Utah, we export out of the country. So it's not even
yeah.
going to feed cattle or animals in the United States. Like there's this argument, it's like, well, you know, if we stop growing alfalfa, it's going to kill the cattle industry. It's like, well, the alfalfa is going out of the country anyway. Like the cattle industry in the United States is already struggling as it is, and a lot of the food that is grown here goes out of the country. It's not staying here. Is that right? Am I understanding that right?
Yeah, so the alfalfa market is really interesting. So when you talk about the alfalfa market, yeah, a lot of it is exported. I don't know the exact number on it, but yes, a lot of it is. Most of it ends up going to dairies. That's where the majority of alfalfa ends up at. But yeah, the beef industry for sure consumes a lot of it. But the problem is, in agriculture, what we did have done. So when I was younger, and even well before my time, even where we're at, and I mean, you look at St. George, the same thing. They used to grow cotton, they used to grow watermelons, they used to grow a lot of things down there.
Mm-hmm.
Here they used to grow sugar beets, peas, beans, those types of things. But we've removed the infrastructure to be able to process those, and so the only infrastructure we have to process anything right now is alfalfa. And so when we've done away with those things, we've really seen that increase. And I would like to see our agricultural commodity market diversified again here in the state. We need to go back to growing grains, processing our own grains, flour, bees, beans, sugar beets, whatever. We can and have the ability to do that there. And I'd like us to go back that direction.
What do you think? What would no, that's a bigger question. It's like, how do we get there? Like in my mind, I just think,
No,
you know,
it's a valid question.
it seems like there was a convention called Agritech, just I guess a couple of weeks ago. I just only heard about it in passing, and I couldn't help but think all that they talked about was like, how do we make things in a lab versus like, how could we actually grow things in the earth with and employ technology and you know, revolutionize agriculture in a way that can, you know, keep costs down and benefit the farmers, like, and do things better rather than try to like make stuff in a lab. But for whatever reason, I have like this, I'm the automatic response when I hear agricultural technology, I can't help but think they're just trying to do everything in a lab, but maybe I'm off.
Yeah.
But what are your
No,
thoughts?
no, there is a big push. There is a big push from the top. I mean, you're seeing 3D printed meats and lab grown meats and those kind of things, crickets and insect proteins, absolutely terrible. But when you talk about agricultural technology, if we want to talk about ag technology, look at what Europe's done. Europe is night and day ahead of the United States. It's because they've had to become much more efficient because of their land restrictions. They don't have
Yeah.
near as much, and so they are ahead of us when it comes to agricultural technology. So with that, the ag market's changing. The ag world is changing. We are increasing efficiencies day by day. We're able to, grow things with less pesticides. Yeah, you're starting to see lasers. They're using big rolling lasers that go out through the fields to weed. Um, yeah, very expensive.
Wow.
But you're starting to see things change, and you're starting to see farmers and ranchers get more efficient. They know they have to get efficient or they're not going to survive. So that's the technology side we see. But there is other things. There are technologies coming along that I believe are going to be detrimental. I mean, the animal proteins, the lab grown meats, the mRNA vaccines, those types of things that nobody knows anything about, but yet they're ready and willing to jump hook, line, and sinker into those and start putting them into our market is absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, so you're running for the governor seat. The convention is coming up this Saturday. It's you, Governor Cox, and Phil Lyman. What made you throw your hat into the ring, right? What made you jump in here at this point?
Yeah. It's things like what we're talking about right now. I mean, what really drove me into politics back in the beginning, the reason I came off the farm and really started getting involved in social media and politics was agriculture. I mean, the problems that we're seeing in agriculture, we have never been able to tell our own story in ag, and agriculture has been demonized. I mean, you look at the Green Revolution, Green New Deal, all those kind of things. I mean, public enemy number one is ranching and agriculture. But and this is just a side note, but if it were really about that, everybody would be wanting more and more because they talk about carbon in the atmosphere. They talk about, carbon load. Well, agriculture has been shown that it is the only industry that is a net zero carbon emitter. And so they come after agriculture. So that's why I got into politics. But once I did get into politics as chairman, I saw how things were working. I saw what was actually happening. You get to see it on the outside from 10,000 feet, but when you get to ground level in politics, you understand what it is they're doing, how much money they're spending on things that don't matter, and where we're not putting money that is important in this infrastructure. And going back, we need to be sustainable as the state of Utah, because I don't trust what's going on with the federal government right now. I don't like what they've done. I don't like what they're doing. They are making us, again, as we talk, they are making us dependent on foreign countries for even our own food. So Utah should be self-sustaining, and I'm watching what they're spending money and where they're putting their priorities. Now, we are not setting Utah up to be successful, and so that is ultimately what I got in, because I want to see a safe place for my family and for my kids, that in the future they know that they'll be safe and that they have a place to grow a family and raise a kid, and that we have that infrastructure to make sure that happens.
Yeah, no, I think that makes a lot of sense to me. And the self-sustainability, right? I think if you look back in history and you have this protectionist versus an isolationist versus globalist, at what capacity is it our job to help other nations that are around us or neighboring states? We've always kind of had this battle between our local community versus the greater community, these broader communities, and we kind of ebb and flow. And it seems like for, the better part of the last 30 years, it's been United States last and everybody else first. At least that's kind of what I
Sure.
feel like. If I'm going to give an honest assessment, it seems like we've made decisions to better everybody else, all the other countries, and our focus is less on us. And so there's this rising, populist movement to refocus on local and national, strategies, priorities. And that,
No, you're 100% correct, but that's why the Make America Great movement and Donald Trump is so very popular. I mean, there are parts of this country who feel like they have been forgotten and left behind. And when Donald Trump showed up in 2016, he was able to move that needle to places where it had never been before. It's because he is looking at these places where jobs are leaving, where manufacture are leaving, where it used to be thriving and vibrant communities of manufacturing and agriculture. And the rest of the world was fine. The rest of the country was fine. Former presidents, they were fine. Let's ship it out of the country. Let's take it somewhere else. In our quest for cheap things, we have made ourselves vulnerable as a nation. And so that's why you're seeing a huge resurgence in this and this really nationalism. I mean, whatever you want to call it, that we are looking to ourselves again and saying, hey, we have made ourselves vulnerable to the rest of the world. I remember when Donald Trump was president. I'm old enough to remember in 2016 when Trump was looking for $6 to $8 billion to build the southern border wall. Congress could not find $6 to $8 billion. There's no money. We're not going to afford that. We can't secure the border for $6 to $8 billion. We just sent $61 billion to Ukraine the other day. Again, on top of the $180 billion we've already sent them. This goes to exactly what you're talking about. We won't even take care of ourselves, but we're more than happy to borrow money on the backs of our children that we don't even have, money that we'll never see the end of, to help other countries.
Yeah, it's like when you're on an airplane, they say you must secure your own mask before you help those around you, and we've completely there's no mask. We have no mask on. We're not securing our own oxygen. We're trying to help everybody else as the plane is rapidly descending from the sky. At least that's my perspective. But
you're spot on. You're spot on. And I've always told people, I mean, you can't fill somebody's glass if your pitcher's empty.
Yeah.
And the United States pitcher is running dry right now. And we have to get back. I mean, control it where we can. But I have lost trust and I've lost faith in the federal government and their ability to be able to help us. I don't think that they can, and I don't think that they will. So we as a state must stand on our own. We must produce our own energy. We must mine our own goods. We must bolster our manufacturing industries. We must make our agricultural self-sustaining and be able to get these products to market to Utahns so we can have clean, safe food that is reliable for them for the future.
Yeah, for sure. So I can't help but think, we have this nationalism that's continuing to rise within the country in itself. But what I saw exposed out of COVID is the existing networks that were strong going into COVID. A lot of them were fragmented and kind of dismantled. And within the Republican Party in the same moments, right? And this kind of partly due to Donald Trump, it seems like the party within itself as a network was kind of dismantled. There wasn't the unification. There was these big chasms between the two, and you saw it at the national level, but for sure at the state level. And you and I have talked about this a little bit, but where do you see the state of the Republican Party right now? What would you say the state of the party is at the moment?
Yeah, no, the party is looking for something different. There's no question in my mind that the go along to get along, so they're done with it. That we are ready to take control, because for so long they would, take niceties and they'd be like, we can be nice about this. We can find ways to, compromise and do all this. People are done with that. They are done with disagreeing better. They're done with that compromise. They are ready to move on. And you're seeing that in a big way. There are people, early on in the argument in 2020 was, Trump's mean. He says all these dumb things. Well, there's a lot of people out there that really don't care right now what Trump says. They want $1.89 gas. They want Russia to stay within their borders. They want peace in the Middle East. They want our economy back on track. They want mortgage rates to where they can afford to buy a home. They don't care what Donald Trump says at this point. They want leadership. They want to put America first. They want to put us back on track. And you're seeing people who can no longer ignore that, whereas they could in 2020 because things were good enough.
Yeah.
As far as the Republican Party goes, I like it, hate it, take it for what it's worth. But in my mind, the party of Nikki Haley at a national level and those moderate Republicans, it's over. Yeah. Because the party, they're moving on from that. They are ready to move forward and they're ready to put America first.
Yeah, I think this is one of the shortest campaign seasons for a presidential election ever, right? I think it's one of the fastest, like basically the assumed candidate for president. It happened faster for a challenger, right? Somebody that wasn't already sitting in the presidential seat as fast as it's ever happened. So it's kind of a clear,
absolutely
a clear mandate for Trump to be the leader within the party. So then if you take it locally, you would expect the executive, Spencer Cox, to be, he's a Republican. You'd expect him to kind of be a big leader within the Republican Party. Would you say that's true?
No, I wish I could.
Was he once upon a time? Was he once upon a time, or has it always been kind of
To me, it's
I don't
always
know.
just been go along to get along, and that's why I didn't support him when he ran the first time. I
Hmm.
hate to say it, we're from the same county. He lives 6 or 7 miles up the road, but I didn't support him in the first race because I didn't believe that that was the right direction for the state to go. Niceties and compromise. Yeah, you can be decent to folks. You can be kind. You don't have to do dumb things. But at the end of the day, this continual compromise, we have compromised our way into a corner. You look at the state of Utah. You tell me a time. Tell me a time when the state of Utah has gone to the right. Tell me a time when you've seen it become more and more conservative because of the legislative process and leadership from the top. You haven't. Look at
Yeah.
what DeSantis did in Florida. They were a blue swing state. They were on the verge of being a blue swing state. They are now R plus 20. And you know why? Because he stood on what he knew. He stood for the principles of the Republican Party, and people saw it. They saw that leadership. They saw what that looked like. And the state followed right behind him. And they are in a phenomenal place because of what they've done. But that leadership comes from the top, and that's what we're missing here in this state.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I was reading an article. It said the GOP's party growth has been like 40%, where the Democratic Party growth has been like 90% within the state. And so it's, it's outpacing the GOP growth by a massive margin. And I can't help but just think, starting from the center of Salt Lake, it's like this slow march outside of that kind of epicenter of the party, the political affiliation is changing. And so, to your point, I'm not quite sure, outside of leadership from the governorship and the Republican Party, like what else can tackle that. So as far as your influence, so you ran and you're the youngest state chair of the Republican Party in history, right? For Utah.
Yeah.
And
Yep. Absolutely.
what maybe take me through, how did you get to that point? You made some great statements. I was reading some articles about why you wanted to get there. And then you were there for, a single term essentially, and it seemed like that was by choice. Maybe take me through that and help me understand that.
No, absolutely. So, going back to 2020, 2021, when I ran for state party chairman, I had just come off, I had ran for Congress. We were unsuccessful, but it was just really to get my feet wet. We didn't expect much out of that one. But coming back, I wanted to get involved, and I wanted to get involved in a big way, and I wanted to be able to help move the direction of the state. Because again, the reason I ran in the first place, I was concerned about the direction of the party and the leadership in the state. Well, I'm worried about the same thing right now. I'm worried about the direction of the state and the leadership and the quality of leadership that we have here. So when I ran for chairman, that was really the basis of all of it. As I thought, you know what, now's the time to make that change. We've seen this faction and this fracture within the party. Let's see if we can't bring us together, but let's bring us together around the conservative principles. Let's bring us together around things that we all can believe in, and that is the Republican Party platform. I mean, I don't know anybody that can read the platform that's a conservative and not say I agree with basically 99% of what is in there. And so I made that the basis of everything that I did as chairman, is how do we get the party back to the platform? I said this on Tucker Carlson when I was on there a couple of years ago, that the party, I never liked the fact that the party is called the big tent, because that assumes that the tent moves. The party cannot move. We have to ground ourselves in those moral principles. The doors are wide open. If you want to bring yourself to the party, come on in. But this is where the party is, and we are not going to move. And that was really what I took on. And that was the direction we set. It's no nonsense, no BS, no drama. We are going in, and this is what we are going to do. And that's exactly what we did. We cut spending where we didn't need to. We stopped taking money from people who we shouldn't have been taking money from. We said, here's the party. If you want to support it, come get on the wagon. And it cost us some donors. Don't get me wrong. They made my life very difficult. Coming in with, I mean, from the get-go, when I was elected, if anybody remembers, there was a slate against me that the governor had endorsed, this lieutenant governor had endorsed, the speaker of the House, the president of the Senate. Everybody else was backing the other guy. I was the anti-establishment candidate, and I was the underdog in that race. And guess what? people heard what I had to say. They believed in what I say. Those guys outspent me 50-1, and I was still able to come out on top. And
Wow.
again, this goes back to what you're talking about. People are looking for a new direction. And that's what we did with the party, and that's exactly what we'll do with the state. Is these are the principles we're going to follow.
So
These are the rules we're going to play within.
why'd you only go for the one term? I guess
Yeah.
maybe help me
Because I
understand
saw
that.
an opening.
It's like you had
Yeah,
that win. You had that win. So,
yeah.
sticking around a little longer to get some time in there.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
no, I saw an opening and I felt like I had taken the party as far as I could. I had set the direction. I had really done away with a lot of the rifts I felt within the party that needed to be corrected. I had finally retired the debt of the party once and for all. I had cut the spending in places where we shouldn't have been spending money and got us back to a fiscal conservative party. I then took and said, you know what? I'm going to run for governor. It had popped into my head. Hell, it's been nigh on 2 years ago. And I said, you know what, this sounds crazy, but I think that's what I'm going to do. And so I saw this opening. I saw the lack of leadership that we have. And I see this drift of our state getting worse and worse. I mean, anybody who wants to look at the first 3 years, everybody says, oh man, the governor's doing great right now. And like, yeah, because it's election season. These guys learn how to spell conservative every 4 years. It's an election cycle. Of course, he's back being a conservative again, or acting like a conservative again, or pretending to be a conservative again. But look at the first 3 years, vetoing the transgender bill, stating the pronouns. I mean, we can talk
Closing
about
businesses.
social issues.
Closing
We can
businesses.
talk about the social issues all day long.
Yeah.
But look at what they've done with the state. Look at what they've done with spending. They have doubled our state spending. In 10 years, he's added a third of our state spending since 2021.
The legislature has something to do with that too, though, right? Like the legislature
no,
for
absolutely.
sure has something to do with
Absolutely. The governor proposes the budget, the legislature passes it. But to me, it rests on the shoulders of the governor, because guess what? They're going to take credit for it. They're taking credit for the tax cuts. They say, oh, we've cut taxes $1.3 billion. Well, who's taking credit for that? The governor's office. So where does the buck stop? Because they do propose that budget, but they have a major say in how that money is spent and where that money goes to. And it is a top-down thing. I mean, if you come up and say, hey, we want to go on a direction, the governor controls the bully pulpit. He is able to dictate these things and say, you know what, we're going to cut this. But because look at the growth of spending since the time we have become a state till now. It had been very steady up until 2021. Well, who took over in 2021? Well, once we hit 2021, we added $8 billion from $21.5 billion budget to $29.5 billion budget in just those 3 years.
Yep.
We went from taking $4 billion a year from the federal government in 2021 to $9.5 billion we take from the federal government today to pay our bills here in the state. 1/3 of our budget is paid by the federal government, and that's been since this tenure started.
Yeah. Yeah. It's insane. And so, going, I just can't help but think that role as the chairman of the party, did you see that the power in which that kind of controls within the party? Is there, cause when we talk for a minute, let me back up.
Yeah.
We spoke for a minute about how there is a division in the party. I think it's broken by them having the caucus and the signature gathering at the same time, which was decided upon by the state legislature. Am I understanding that right?
Correct.
Yes. The government decided what a party should do in their nomination process, which broke the caucus system. This is my words. They broke it. Sure. And now the caucus system is rendered as almost like worthless.
Well, now we have the worst of both worlds.
Yeah, we basically are stuck in the middle. And so I think you mentioned, or I said, I think that's the single dividing line between the party right now, right? For the unification to happen, it seems like we got to pick one side or the other, because that seems to be where the party's line is drawn. Is that true?
Yeah, no, I would say you're very correct in that, because the party does not have a lot of say. So let me just lay it out for what it's worth. So when they passed Senate Bill 54, as commonly known as SB 54, it allowed, prior to that, the parties were able to nominate the candidates they wanted to see in the primary election. They had autonomy at their conventions to decide who they were going to put on the primary ballot. It could be one person, it could be two person. So they had that autonomy to do that and to choose those Republicans how they saw fit, who they thought best represented the party. So at the passage of Senate Bill 54, it allowed for the signature gathering. Basically, you go out and gather signatures on a petition that allows you to show up on the primary ballot. But how it's done is they pay these big signature gathering companies and they send people out on the streets who know nothing about the candidates nor care about them. They go door to door and they get people to sign these petitions and they'll turn in these signatures. But I mean, we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars to get these signatures. And so basically you're buying yourself a slot on the primary ballot. That's really what it boils down to. You're buying your slot on the primary ballot. Again, money comes to play. And that's why I love the caucus convention system. Because I'm the only candidate in the gubernatorial race right now that didn't file to gather signatures, because I believe in the party. I believe in their ability to nominate candidates who best represent the morals of the Republican Party and the platform itself. So that's why I didn't gather signatures while my other 4 competitors filed to gather signatures. The governor will be on the primary ballot because he had his signatures gathered. So with all of that, we lost the autonomy as a party to be able to put candidates on the ballot whom we thought best represented the party. And now people can go around the party and get on the ballot by simply paying money.
My thought is, why did they do that? Why did the Republicans do that to themselves?
Yeah, there's a lot of speculation and a lot of I don't know.
That's all I got is speculation. I've been like trying to like rationalize it in my head.
Reasons as to why they would do this. But to me, looking from the inside and from the outside, it looks like there was a big group of people, count my vote, Salt Lake City elites who didn't want the party to be able to choose anymore. Because in the state of Utah, if you don't have an R behind your name, you don't win an election. And they didn't like the fact that they couldn't control the system. It was hard to control. The delegates make up their own minds. Even today, man, I couldn't tell you where the delegates are going into Saturday. I'd like to say I have a great grasp on where they're going to be, but I don't, because they have the autonomy and the ability to, nominate candidates how they see fit. So I believe that would be a factor into why. And when you look at the bigger picture, that seems to be the one thing that stands out to us, because other states, look at Alabama, they are able to control which Republicans they put on the ballot and how a Republican makes it to the general election. The state should absolutely manage the general election. There's no question, because it's Republican versus Democrat versus independents, whatever. That should be done by the government. But Republicans should have the ability to nominate the candidates who best represent the party. And right now, we don't have that. And when we had that and when we lost that, you did lose participation in the system. So now participation's down in the caucus and convention system. Signature gatherers are up.
Well, I'll expand on that a little bit just from my experience in the caucus system. So my precinct is Ivans 7, brand new precinct, right? So Republicans are running the caucus system in at the local level. This is the first caucus system. I walk in and it's brand new, so nobody knows anything. There is no leadership, and then there's somebody from the party that's kind of facilitating this first round of establishing a chairman, vice chair, all the roles, what delegates are, what county delegates are, and I walked out of there thinking like, this is very disorganized and seems like there's not a lot of people that know what's going on. And that seems like a clear issue, because as soon as you devalue the caucus system at all, anybody that was in a leadership position that would understand it or believe in it, now they're gone. Now it's like, well, this isn't all. Yeah, they just walk away. Why would anyone want to take the torch of saying, I really believe in this, if it doesn't necessarily matter, right? And then I went to the county convention, and we had our 2 state Senate, the Don Ipson and Chad Benyon, and there was one other candidate as well, Chad Green, and two left, right? Well, one guy is out, and now 2 are going to go on the ballot because one gathered signatures, and the other one, they did the caucus system, but there wasn't enough in the caucus to only send one anyway, which I think the threshold's like 60%. So as you get into
70% Washington County, 60% at the state level.
Okay, perfect. So, and these are like these little tiny details where I was talking to my mom and she's like, I have no idea how it works. She's like, it seems so complicated. She's like, why can't we just vote in a primary? And because of the signature gathering, and the caucus system, just the primary makes it simple. Like the caucus system is
Yeah,
confusing. Then you have the signatures that adds it to make it more complex. And then you just get people that don't want to participate at all. So it's
sure.
they, I think you nailed it with saying they felt like they couldn't control it when it was just the caucus system because it was a true representative democracy from the
Sure.
base level all the way up. And they wanted to blow that up. But
Because money can't buy it. But you get into an open primary, you get into a jungle primary or
it's,
whatever you
yeah.
want to call them. Man, money buys the game.
Yep.
There is no question about it. Money buys the game.
Yep.
And it's no different with the signatures. If you want to get on the ballot, man, I can go pay $500,000 today and go get my way on the ballot. But that's not what I'm about. And that's not what government should be. I mean, that's gotten us into the problem between lobbyists and paid lobbying and expensive elections, man. That's got us into the position that we're in because there are a lot of fantastic candidates out there. And I'm not going to call myself a fantastic candidate, but like me, who don't have a lot of money or aren't born in wealth or not well connected to the big donors and don't play with the Salt Lake City billionaires who need this system to be able to make their way on the ballot. I mean, you're going to see it. We don't raise near as much as these other people do. I am unwilling to compromise my principles for a donation. But you're going to see the governor raise over $1 million. You're going to see some of my competitors borrow money from people. Go look at their disclosures today. See who they're getting money from. Look at their loans. See who's borrowing money to run. I refuse to. That is fiscally irresponsible. If you claim to be a fiscal conservative, you're not going to go out and borrow money to run a freaking race. Guys, like this is what we can't be doing. This is what we should be avoiding. And so for me, it's prime. And that's why I am convention only. That's why I didn't gather signatures, is because I can get my way to the ballot by appealing to you guys, to my peers, and say, you know what? I believe that I am the best candidate to run in this race. And it's not going to cost me. I mean, we have raised far less, but that says nothing about us as a candidate. Jordan Peterson said, and this was a little bit ago that I heard it, and I might butcher it, but he says, I cannot think of a worse metric to judge a candidate on, but then by how much money they raise. He says, you're just prepping them and teaching them to go out and borrow money and to get money and do whatever they have to do to get money to win an election. What do you think they're going to do when they get
I
in
don't even know
office?
the answer to this question. Could you, as a governor, could you make a campaign finance limit? Like, could you, as the governor, do that? Or is it fully take state legislation to require that there's a cap on campaign finance? Like,
Sure.
at the state
Now,
level, could you do it?
it would have to come through the legislature. I'm not sure if I'd have to look, or I'm not sure if it's a constitutional change or not. Constitutional changes take a lot more effort. I believe it would just be a legislative change, but yeah, it would take the legislature and the governor's office. Some federal races have the spending caps and the state races doesn't. I mean, in the governor's race, you can take as much money from anybody as you want, but it's not always so much the dollar amounts in total. I mean, yeah, you could go get $1 million from somebody who supports a conservative cause and could make a difference. But it's all these other entities that they go out and they appeal to, and outside money and the developers. And there are so many people just pouring money into that. But we're teaching these candidates that they have to go out and they have to sell themselves to these people or promise favors to get donations. What do we expect when they get in there?
Yeah.
When they say, well, why are they passing bills that strictly benefit this group or passing bills that are giving $1 billion? Here, prime example. Legislature and the governor's office, $1 billion for a baseball stadium, $1 billion for a hockey team, special tax districts for them. Like that. You want to know, go look at the donation sheets, go look at who's running the show. And you wonder why they have that ability to, because we're prepping these candidates and we're making it so we're teaching them these bad habits, basically, to go kiss up to these people to get donation monies to get elected.
Something you said, I think you're totally right. Something you said is appealing to your peers. How does the Republican Party that is under 40 years old, how do we unify that group? Because you and I have talked about this. Is it's like the baby boomer generation has held on to leadership longer than they should have, and Gen X hasn't ever taken the torch. At least from my perspective, they haven't really taken the torch. How do we get the millennial generation to take the torch in the Republican Party, like conservative values? How do we unify that group?
That's an excellent question, and I've thought a lot about it actually, and it's hard. I mean, coming from where I came from, you got to win once. This deal's about timing, and this deal is about messaging. It's the right message at the right time to the right people, and I kind of, I would say I'm not an anomaly, but I am in this instance because I'm kind of a connector, kind of a bridge between the older generation, the boomers, whatever you want to call them, and the younger generation. Because yeah, I do find myself age-wise and situational with the younger generation. Yeah, I resonate to the millennials here. They are my age group. Um, with all that said, I've got 5 children. I grew up in an old, very old way. I grew up in the ranch with the old time values. I was raised by my dad and my grandpa, who taught me the value of hard work and taught me the importance of things that that really matter. These fundamental principles that bind us as Republicans and make us great stewards and great citizens. Those are the things I learned. And so I'm kind of that bridge between the older generation and the younger generation. And so I think that we have a great opportunity, but we have to stick together because they have made it so there's not a place. I'm sure you've heard it, come back and run when you're older. Aren't you too young? I hear it all the time. They said, oh, when I ran for chairman, they're like, he's too young. He's out of his depth. He doesn't know what's happening, what's going on. And I just said, guys,
I think the average age of the revolution at the during the Revolutionary War, like the founding fathers, like the average age is like 34 years old. It's like 32 or 34 years old.
Even younger than that. A lot of them were 22, 24, 26.
Yeah. It's crazy. The idea that nowadays, because there's so much coddling in that younger generation where it's like, oh, you can't be trusted at 16 to go get a job, right? Where it was like, a long time ago, you were 12, you were going to get a job, like responsibility. And coming from a ranching background or a farming background, you were working. I don't even have to guess this. I know for a fact.
At 8 years old and said, drive this tractor till it runs out of fuel. And then
go get to work. Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Like, go get to work. And so I totally, that makes a lot of sense too, of just that. There's this weird perspective that age has something to do with it, but that's not necessarily the case.
No, but if you don't give these younger folks responsibility, they're never going to grow.
They won't take it.
They won't take responsibility, and that's the problem that we're seeing is they're not being put in responsible positions. They're not able to make these differences, because we're not allowing them to do it. They won't let them in the door because they're too young, too inexperienced, whatever they want to say. But I feel like Trump, going back to him, I feel like he broke the mold on that one, that it's not, oh, you have to have so much political experience and you have to climb the ladder. I mean, let's talk about career politicians for a second. You want to see how we get in the situation we're in. These guys get in and they climb the ladder. I mean, they start a county commission, they run to mayor, they go to the county, they start at the town in their city council. They go to mayor, they go to the county commission, and they go to the legislature, and they keep working their way on up. And we wonder why they have bad habits when they get to the top. Yeah. I mean, you look at some of the other folks in this race, they've been in politics 15, 20 years, some of them. It's like, what do we define as career politicians? But Trump broke that mold when Trump said, hey, it doesn't take all that you're saying it takes, because for so long they've made it an elite club. The credentialed elites, they have made it a club. So if you don't fit there, if you're blue collar, if you're not educated, if you're not an attorney, if you haven't been in politics for 20 years, you don't belong. And Trump broke that. I mean, he shattered that thing wide open. And I attribute that as a big part of why I won the race for chairman. Again, I was spent 50-1, young, not well known in the party, but I had a message, and that message resonated with people. And we're hoping to do that again this weekend.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to see how the convention turns out. After talking to Phil, I haven't had a chance to really interview Spencer Cox, but he's also
good luck.
At the end. That's true. It could be a little bit difficult. I will say this: I interviewed him back in 2019, right before he took over as governor, and it was actually, I was wildly surprised at how easy it was to get a hold of him. It's campaign season. Getting a hold of him at this point, I can see how it's just busy, right? You're busy. Phil Lyman was busy. I can understand that. However, he has a track record that is going to speak for himself, right? And so you can campaign all you want, but what did you do in your 4 years? and hopefully the party paid attention. I hope the party paid attention. I think they have. Lots of new delegates, at least in Washington County. I'm assuming across the state, lots of new people that have never done this before are going to be there. So it'll be interesting to see how those numbers actually show up. If you were to say, could you think of like a strategy? Because I can't help but think, how do you unify a younger Republican Party? Like, maybe I'm looking for you for guidance. Like here in Washington County, what could I do to kind of bring in a younger generation into the party? Like, do we need to bring back like extracurricular school, like civics, like community groups? You know what I mean? Like what made the Republican Party strong in previous years? Like what have we forgotten how to like come together? Like, I don't know.
No, honestly, it comes from the parents. If I'm going to be completely honest, I believe that it comes from the parents, and we have gone for so long without talking about politics or shying away from politics because they've come so divisive or whatever it is that it has led to a misunderstanding about how we communicate about politics. And so we don't pass that on to our kids. My kids, that's not the case. They're very political and they're very opinionated and they want to be involved in it. And by the time that they grow up and they're ready for it, they want to step into it. They want to participate. But now more than ever, I'm seeing more and more young kids want to be in politics, and we have to give them a place to fit. And this was something that is near and dear to me because I've been there. Like I'm still on the younger spectrum of people in this game. But you know how many times that people have told me, hey, come back when you're older, run for it. And man, I had somebody call me the night before the chairman's race in 2021, a dear friend of mine, and say something that I consider to be pretty offensive to me. I was like, man, why would you even say that to me? He says, you've done a good job. He says, maybe I hope you'll run as the county party chair at some point. Basically like, yeah, good try, but you don't belong here. Get out of the game. And he's an elected official, and I still consider him a friend today, but it just really hurt that we didn't have, there's no place for me. And that's where the Democrats win. You want to understand why the Democrats are winning? It's because they're making a place for the younger kids. They're giving something for these younger kids to talk about and to be excited or revved up about. And that's why they're moving over. If we would make a place for people in the Republican Party, if we would make a spot and prioritize these young kids and meet them where they are, we'd never lose a race again. I truly believe that, because the conservative principles they're timeless. They work time and time again, and it will continue to prove itself. But we have to make a place for these young kids in politics, or else we're going to lose them.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. That's a really good point. We're lacking in local leadership, and we got to make a place for kids to fit in there. I think that's a great perspective.
Sure, because for some reason we've got it in our heads that you have to be older to be in politics. It's like right now, the average age of Utahns is 31 years old, I believe. 31 is the average age of Utah, and they wonder why they're underrepresented.
Yeah, it's a good question. That's a good point. One of the things, like for me, getting involved doesn't always mean running for a seat either, right? And I think that's what's been interesting to watch is like, the idea of, well, I got to get involved means that I have to do some extraordinary effort. And really just getting involved is just pay attention. Just carve out some attention to pay attention to what's going on, and just starting at the local level is going to be the most important thing. And, just your local congressional races and the state legislature races, and then this governor race, I think is super important. What do you think it's going to take? I'm after the convention, I think kind of identifying specifically what it's going to take to usher in a new leadership. Because from the perspective I'm looking at, I see a very difficult road of anybody beating Governor Cox, because I don't think Utah's in a painful enough situation where they feel like, oh, I have to make a change in this. And so I'm hopeful after the convention. My guess is that having you and Phil take a massive amount of the delegates and show like a clear challenge to his weight within convention is going to send the best message going into the primary. So that's what I'm hopeful for is to really not have Cox run away with the delegate vote, that there's a big solid challenge to him to really show that
No,
there's some change needed.
and there is going to be a big solid challenge at convention. Most people, we don't like to jinx it, but most people are predicting he is definitely not the winner of convention. To me right now, and with our numbers, it's a toss up between Phil and I. And Phil and I have both, been in communication and said, hey, whoever wins a convention needs to be the person to go on to run in the primary, because there's no room for two other candidates besides the governor. If people are looking for a new governor, there cannot be two. But you talked about it for a second, so I want to go jump back and address it a little bit. Never before have we had an incumbent Republican governor in the state of Utah that is in as vulnerable of a state as he is in right now. You look at the Deseret News poll and that everybody called so damning for the other candidates that came out a month and a half or so ago. It had him at 50%, plus or minus 5.5.
Wow.
It had the unknowns at 37, and we were all split equally between 3 and 5. What anybody who's seen politics or who's played this game before knows, he is underwater. Because if the Deseret News could have put him at 55%, they would have. Very friendly outlet. But the 37% unknowns, what that should tell everyone, they don't want him. They just don't know who they want. And all they need is permission to vote for somebody different.
That's a good point right there. That's a good point. And those polls, this is another thing, like the polls, I can see so many people are like, I don't trust anything I read. I just have such a hard time. I look at everything with such skepticism, right? Is like, what,
as you should,
what is true? I know, man. And so I see polls like that. And I hope, the mentality of saying, well, I've heard this a bunch of times. Well, I want a candidate that can win. And it boggles my mind, is that why are you coming from that perspective? Why aren't you just saying who is the best candidate? From my perspective, who is the best candidate? It doesn't matter. Like,
the best
who
candidate should be the one that's able to win too. And I think we could talk about that. And I don't mean to jump in here, but this is something I've talked a lot about lately. How many times has the convention put forward a candidate that honestly couldn't win in a primary? Sometimes they are just a little bit better one way or the other, but the disagreement in policy is less than 2%, maybe that.
Yeah.
But when we look at this race, and I'm going to be honest, I consider Phil a dear friend, and I've been very good about, going forward. He's a friend. I don't ever want to offend him in any way, shape, or form. But the truth of the matter is, in politics, if you're playing defense, you are losing. If you are explaining, you are losing. And so delegates must look at this. Whoever is going to the primary will be decided on Saturday. There's no questions asked. That person's going to be picked on Saturday because nobody else has met the signature threshold. Whoever comes out of convention will be the one to go to the primary. They have to put forward a candidate who can win in this primary and who is not explaining from day one. I love Phil. What he did was heroic. But it's going to be hard to explain to the general populace, because a lot of times in this state, people take more time to decide between Pepsi and Coke than who to vote for. And that's a sad thing. But the negatives, you have to look at the negatives and what can and will be used against these candidates. And that makes them harder to elect. And again, if you're having to explain what he did, what Phil did on his ride down there was phenomenal. But it's going to be a tough thing to overcome in a primary. Trying to explain it. If he had time to explain it to everybody in the state, he would win hands down. But you're not going to get that. You're not going to be able to explain this. This is a short primary season. So I am the candidate who has and is ready to play offense from day one, who's ready to go out there and start swinging, because that's what we have to be able to do if we're going to win this election.
I like that perspective. Are you comfortable at this point identifying the other candidates that are running? Do you have endorsements for the Senate or AG or any of those spots, or are you gonna play? Let's see what happens in convention. I know it's a tough question, but
no, I've been honest. I've really just played out of all of those. I try not to weigh in on those, because if I wasn't running, sure, I'd absolutely weigh in on them. But with me running, I don't want them to pick winners and losers in my race, and I don't want to do the same in the other races, because I haven't done enough research, to be honest. I haven't done enough research into all of them, because we've been so focused on our own race to be able to say that. But I think convention will be pretty telling.
Yeah. That's I interviewed Derek Brown for AG, and one of the things I heard from a lot of the delegates and a lot of the people at least locally, is that, you know, one of the things I don't like about him is he's endorsed by Cox. And I'm
Yeah.
like, dang, well, like, I mean, does he get to choose who he's endorsed by?
Right.
Does he, I mean, and then
Right.
for
And
Cox
he's
to
also
out,
endorsed by Mike Lee too. So people have to do their own research. And that's
right.
why I say here's another thing I want to put out to people. Don't let someone else's opinion, and yeah, sure it matters, take it into account, but don't let somebody else's opinion of someone make up your ultimate decision. Because yeah, like in that case, endorsed on one end, endorsed on the other end. Do your research. Go look at their past history, look at their voting records, look at who they are, where they've been, what they've done. Get them, sit down, talk with them, reach out to them, because you'll be able to tell in a real hurry who these people really are. And that's why I don't like weighing in, because I don't want somebody telling me who I should vote for. And I think you should go out and do your own research and absolutely say, this is the person I support, because it's too easy to take somebody's word for it. Somebody in a high and powerful place, they tell you how to vote. You don't know what you're getting.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's a good point. I appreciate that perspective. We could talk about a lot more.
Sure.
I want a message to the delegates that are already think they have their mind made up that they're going to go and vote for Cox in the convention. What's a message that you want to send just directly to those that you think, okay, these people are convinced that Cox has done a good job for this or that reason. What would your message be directly to them?
Sure. Again, glad you have somebody that you'd like to support. Kudos to you for sticking to what you think. That being said, don't just look at things on the outside. Go look at what's happening behind closed doors. Go look at legislation passed. Do your research. Look who their donors are. Ask questions. Look at why people are getting billion-dollar baseball stadiums, billion-dollar hockey teams. Look at who their donations are coming from. Look at the 35,000 new homes affordable housing initiative. Go look into that for a minute and see who actually benefits, because I promise you it's not the people. Look at the undercurrent. The other argument I would make is, if you as a delegate think you've got your mind made up, go talk to your precinct, see what they have to say, because that's the way this deal's supposed to work. The last appeal I'll make to you is, guess what? He's already on the ballot. So if you want to give a primary, if you want to force a primary, he doesn't need your vote on Saturday. He's already on the ballot. Like, you need to decide who you'd like to see go up against him and give the people, if that's the argument you're going to make, that the people should have the choice, put somebody else on the ballot. Vote for somebody who you think would be, in your opinion, the second best candidate. Put them forward, and then let the general population decide, because that was really what this process was set up to, was to put forward great candidates to be able to run. But again, he's already on the ballot. He doesn't need your help. He doesn't need your vote. He's already there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good message. Okay, man. Well, I want to wish you best of luck. We're going to be out there to do a special edition of the podcast live at the convention. So I'll make sure I stop by and say hello. Best of luck to you. And it's Jorgensen4Utah.com, right?
No, CarsonJorgensen.com.
Just kidding.
Or it's,
I messed that up. Sorry, man.
Utah at Gmail. No, you're all good, man. Like I say, you're getting so many, but we appreciate you. Thanks for having me on, because too often we don't get enough daylight under people to be able to see who they really are. And these long form podcasts, I think, are phenomenal to get a look at what people's temperament looks like, where they're at, how they're grounded.
Yeah, man, this has been helpful for me too. I really appreciate you spending the time. I know it's a busy campaign. Doing what you're doing, man, is not simple. You were just out running the sheep this morning, and now
we're just herding sheep this morning.
Yep, that's awesome, man. Well, thanks again, and hopefully we can have you back on again, and we could keep this conversation going.
No, absolutely. Thank you, and I appreciate all the great questions and the thought that goes into them.
Okay, buddy. We'll see you later. Have a good one.
Yeah, talk soon. Thank you, man. Thanks.